In the spring of 1806, two German astronomers were independently observing Venus. When they noticed something odd, the hemisphere facing away from the sun did not perfectly blend with the blackness of the space. Instead, it had a faint glow with a gray, grayish red or ascent gray appearance. This ascent ray resembles a phenomenon known as Earth sign. It is when sunlight reflected by the Earth faintly illuminates the night side of the moon. It seemed reasonable, therefore, to ascribe the acid light to a similar cause, namely that sunlight reflected by a Venusian moon was faintly illuminating the night side of Venus. Only one slight problem: Venus does not have a moon. This meant that acid light resembled Earth sign in appearance only because there was nothing in the proximity of Venus to reflect any sunlight. In the words of famed astronomer William Herschel, those reasons that are done from the sun cannot possibly shine by a light. A few decades later, another German astronomer, Franz von Susan, proposed a rather creative solution to the mystery. The acid light was a result of sweeping wildfires on the surface of Venus, directly ignited by its inhabitants. As absurd as that sounds, there were tantalizing similarities between Venus and Earth. The two planets were of similar size and much more like Earth. Venus had an atmosphere, the densely cloud-laden atmosphere, which gave atmosphere at astronomers and science fiction authors alike free rein to speculate about what could lie beneath a barren desert, a planet white ocean, a tropical rainforest. Anything was possible. It was in this context that Grotthesen made his proposal in 1836. He believed that Venus was inhabited by a humanoid species who would periodically light fires on the surface, the purpose of which was either to clear land to commemorate a religious occasion or to celebrate the coronation of a new Venusian emperor. Gruthusen did perhaps get a bit carried away, but he was far from the first to suggest that Venus was inhabited. Titans of astronomy like Christian Huygens and William Herschel envisioned all the planets, including Venus, to be teeming with life. And it took a long time for this Roman, romanticized image to fade. In 1960, this illustration appeared in American newspaper with the caption "Remarkable drawing by Mr. Winsor McKay illustrating the conditions on Venus." As astronomical science now believes them to exist, even well into the space age, we still find echoes of this Earth-like perception. In 1967, a Soviet spacecraft plunged into the clouds of Venus to attempt a landing on its surface. While the probe did not survive the descent, it was actually designed to float in case of water landing. History is ripe with stories much like this one, largely forgotten stories that once upon a time promised to end our cosmic solitude. Bygone visions of life asunder long ago fueled a newfound wonder. Venetian fire festivals were not the cause of the Asian light, but observations continued to be made at the end of the 19th century. Some 2 dozen observations had been recorded, but some astronomers would dedicate years to the study of Venus without ever catching a glimpse of its exclusive glow. Instead, they would often be greeted by these weak streaks and patches, they cover large portion of the planet and appear to be features on the surface lurking beneath the clouds. At least that was the opinion of the American astronomer Percival Lowell. Far from the diffuse standing supported by his peers, Lowell would discern a distinctive network of branching spokes. It is just as if a bright veil of some sort of were drawn over the whole disk. These spokes of Venus bore a striking resemblance to markings observed on both Mercury and Mars. The features on Mars were explicitly distinct and remarkably linear. Lowell had been somewhat unimpressed by the spokes on Venus. but he became nothing sort of obsessed with the linear of on Mars. There are celestial sights more dazzling spectacles that inspire more awe, but to the thoughtful observer who is privileged to see them well, there is nothing in the sky so profoundly impressive as that as these canals of Mars. Owing to the striking linearity, Lower could reach but one conclusion: the Martian canal must be the working of an intelligent. He carefully laid out his arguments in three lengthy books filled with these intricate maps and illustrations. The Martian canals represented a vast irrigation network designed to carry melted ice water from the poles down to the equator. While many were understandably skeptical, the idea that Mars could be inhabited by the extremely compelling one. Perhaps even more so that the Venus. Legendary science fiction author H.G. Wells famously wrote The War of the Worlds, a fictional story about the Martian invasion of the Earth, first published in 1897, but a decade later, Wells published a speculative non-fiction article titled The Things That Live on Mars. Inspired by Lower's fanciful interpretation, goes on envision the habitat, society, and appearance of real Martians. To Wells and many others, the existence of Martians was not possible. It was probable, indeed to some, it had already attended a veneer of tour. In 1891, the French Academy of Sciences was bequeathed of bequeathed a sum of 100,000 francs by a wealthy Parisian widow. The money was to be awarded to the first person who found a means of communicating with another planet, with the notable exception of Mars, implying that communication with Martians would have been far too simple of a challenge. The idea of the Martian canals was difficult to ascertain as it resided at the very limits of the perception. Telescopes were not were never quite good enough to conclusively prove nor disprove their existence. A book commissioned by NASA as late as 1965 stated that although there is no unanimous opinion concerning the existence of the canals, most astronomers would probably agree that there are apparently linear markings on Mars. Unlit maps of the red planets published by the US military that very same year features sprawling network of canals. A towering Atlas is now rocket is the launch vehicle that hurtles the Mariner into the heavens. Scientific apparatus on the Mariner will try to measure the density of the planet's atmosphere, and a television camera will seek to make photographs of its surface, giving man his first close-up look at Mars. The American spacecraft Mariner 4 transmitted the first close-up photographs of the Martian surface in the summer of 1965. Despite the complete absence of any linear markings, scientists at NASA were unwilling to give up hope. Nothing positive considering the existence or lack of canals can be concluded on the basis of Mariner 4 photographs. Existent and dwindling hopes aside, the Martian canals had come to an end. The canals, the cities, the Martians are all gone. Imaginative illusions, optical illusions. As far as 1903 had an experiment found that groups of students created a few meters away from the illustration like this one could discern fine sight lines where none existed. The experiment demonstrated that non-linear markings viewed from a distance evoke a no, could evoke a linear appearance. This sort of visual interference is even said to be apparent in certain photographs. I mean, look at this. Not only is the clear correlation between this sketch and this photograph of Mars, but you can almost see this very perceptible line snaking around the planes. The spokes on Venus, meanwhile, bear a curious resemblance to the inside of an eye. It appears that Darwin constrained the aperture of his telescope to such an extreme that the blood vessels inside his eye began to cast shadows. Some of them might have fallen into the lowest retina, creating the illusion of labyrinth markings on distant world. It is as if the bright veil of some sort were drawn over the whole disk. Whether it is the optical illusions, indistinct shadings of on the planets, turbulence in the atmosphere, technological limitations, or an unadapted willingness to believe this network of lines were merely figments of the mind, is something incredibly tragic about this whole misconception. Misconception. I mean, there was a time not so long ago when life beyond meant life right next door. There is still hope of finding less complex forms of life on a select few planets and moons, which is very exciting. Also, but also a far cry from tropical Venus or in simplest on Mars. As our knowledge of the universe continues to expand, so too must our search for cosmic neighbors. By the mid 19th century, the Hazen light had been observed by not dozens but hundreds of observers, many of whom were as experienced as they were adamant of the phenomenon's existence despite the preponderance of visiting accounts. The lack of empirical evidence attracted a fair amount of skepticism. In fact, doubts had plagued this phenomenon since the very beginning. Italian astronomer Giovanni Riccoli is often recognized as the person who discovered the Hazel light in early 1643. Riccoli witnessed a band of colors enveloping a disk of Venus. The night side was tinted greenish blue, enclosed in a semicircle of light. Riccoli ascribed the vivid colors to the light being refracted inside his telescope, an effect known as chromatic aberration. In other words, Gaudi thought the faint glow on Venus was an optical illusion. Okay, so a quick aside, I managed to find an observation that, to my knowledge, has gone completely unnoticed and actually predates the one made by Riccoli. A German priest and scholar named Ignatius Kircher wrote in 1660 that he too had observed a band of colors on Mars. No date was given, but Kircher did provide a location, Palermo, Sicily. Based on the historical record, Chrysus paid his last and only visit to Palermo in the spring of 1638. So Creature observed the Asian light 5 years before Ricoli, and so thus be credited with this discovery. Okay, back to the video. Ricoli's doubt about the Asian light echoed through the centuries, and by the 1900s, it was not uncommon for sightings to be dismissed as mere trick of the eye. Not only were the observations infrequent and unpredictable, but they were often inconsistent brightness, color, and the extent to which the night side was illuminated could vary drastically between accounts, with no hard proof of the existence and a lack of concordance between those who had seen it. The Dazzling light appeared destined to join the ranks of myths and misconceptions. But in 1975, the Soviet spacecraft Venera 9 became the first to successfully orbit Venus, diving into the shadow of the faded twin. It detected faint flashes of light, faint phase flashes of emanating from the clouds below. Venus and Mars were historically been the two prime candidates for cosmic neighbors, but the other planets have not gone completely ignored. Scottish astronomer James Ferguson had few reservations about life in the solar system. When it came to Mercury, for instance, Ferguson thought that Mercury simply possessed greater resilience to heat. It was very likely that the people on Mercury have the same opinion of us as we have of the inhabitants of Jupiter and Saturn, namely that we must be intolerably cold and have very little light at so great a distance from the sun. Inspired by Ferguson's optimism, William Herschel took a step further. In 1795, Herschel confidently announced that the inside of the sun was home to an alien civilization. This might seem incredibly bizarre, but at the time it was not uncommon to view the sun, an enormous planet encased by a luminous atmosphere. Herschel expanded upon the ideas regarding a sunspot as opening in this flaming cell. This, this momentarily exposed the truth to surface underneath. This concealed surface was richly stored with inhabitants who were shielded against the immense heat by the intermediate layers of the clouds. We have great reason to look upon the sun as the most magnificent habitable group. Apart from the big planets and the sun, another bygone candidate for intelligent life is the moon. By using stunning contraption of tubes, wires, and lenses, pioneering selenographer Johannes Hevelius produced some of the earliest detailed maps of the lunar surface, whereas you and I see a barren landscape devoid of life. Hevelius espies upon the moon a near perfect copy of Earth. Mountains and valleys and rivers and lakes, swamplands and woodlands, islands and caves. This vivid interpretation can be traced to the ancient belief that bright and dark patches delineate continents from ocean. In fact, this fallacy is often reflected in the nomenclature we use today. Dark plains on Moon all have aquatic names such as Ocean of Storms, the Lake of Dreams, and the Sea of Tranquility. Tranquility Base here, the Eagle has landed. Though water never filled this gloomy basin, it is not entirely accurate to call them ancient seabeds, for they for they are the volcanic scars left behind by vast oceans of molten rock, making the Lake of Dead an especially apparent name. While Hevelius never observed any creatures on the moon, its subjective resemblance to the Earth must convince him that Lunarius must exist, a conviction still being upheld more than a century later by who else if not William Herschel. I hope and I am convinced that sometime or other, with very evident signs of life will be discovered on the moon. It doesn't take long for this very evident signs to make themselves apparent. I'm almost convinced that this numberless small cases we see on the moon are the works of the Lunarians and may be called their towns. Hercules nearly convinced himself that the created landscape of the moon had been engineered by his inhabitants. Creators of circuses were not the demands of violently impact events but skillfully constructed towns and cities. While Herschel obsessed over circular dwellings, astronomers like Franz von Rothhusen express habitats of all shapes and sizes. This star-like structures appears to be a kind of temple, and because of the star's shape, perhaps it is dedicated in service to the stars. The cycle in the south, the two highest mountains in the north, the two hills in the southwest are natural objects, but it is highly probable that this embankment serve as the dwellings of sentient beings on the moon. In reality, Gruhedson mistook some oddly safe terrain for intelligent design. The increasing speculative nature of these extraordinary claims culminated, culminated in a truly incredible sightings by John Herschel, the son of William Herschel. Whilst gazing upon a wrong formation on the moon, we were thrilled with astonishment to perceive four successive flocks of large winged creatures. They were like human beings. Their wings possessed great expansion and were similar in structure to those that of a bat. The moon was evidently home to a species of walking and flying man-bats. This was truly profound, if not bemusing, discovery, not just for the world but also for John Herschel, because upon being inquired about this remarkable find, John responded with confusion. He had no knowledge of any man-bats on the moon. It turns out the story had been fabricated by the American journalist named Richard Locke. Locke had sought to lampoon the often frivolous debate about life on other worlds, perpetuated by the likes of William Herschel and Franz von Grühzen. Instead, the great moon hawks of 1835 convinced thousands around the world that the moon was inhabited by a bat-like humanoids, unicorn bison, bipedal beavers, as well as storks and goats. There is also this image of a man bat beset Alphat upon the back of a fellow man bat, heli whizzed by a pack of man bats. As to why this guy is coping a whiff, history has declined to answer. As time went on and telescope improved, it became increasingly difficult to argue and figure in favor of the moon's habitability. With no apparent atmosphere, this dry and barren wasteland seemed to improbable abode for life as we know it. But by the mid-century, the life debate had been resurrected by the new hypothesis about the shape of the moon. The argument was that gravitational forces had raised the moon into the shape of an egg. This uneven distribution of mass that meant that any atmosphere or fluids would have coalesced on whichever side was closer to the center of the gravity. If that happened to be the far side of the moon, an argument could be made for its habitability. As one author put it, total near hemisphere is a lifeless desert having neither water nor air to sustain life. The hidden hemisphere may have a teeming population. Among the proponents of the radical hypothesis was none other than John Herschel. An egg shape would to fully account for the total absence both of air and land and of water on the side of the moon turned towards us. This would be quite compatible with the abundant existence of both and of a habitable hemisphere on the opposite side. Had history played out differently, perhaps we would dealing with egg mooners instead of flat earthers at this point. No, but that's lunacy. Okay. While spectators made quick work of the egg-shaped moon hypothesis, far-side inhabitants could not be so easily dismissed. After all, the far side of the moon is unseeable from the Earth and thus ripe for speculation. So then I subjected them to the spectrographic analysis. Is thus a great amount of radioactive dust. Daddy, what are you saying is that somehow for some reason the moon had been unreached by a ring of highly radioactive dust. Something's going on the other side of the moon, the invisible side. Something that we ought to know about. By placing aliens on the far side of the moon, early science fiction authors were able to skirt the line of possibility. If aliens built, if aliens wanted to conceal their presence and perhaps observe humanity from a distance, this cosmic transport was a perfect hiding place. At least this was the opinion of the famed American astronomer Carl Sagan. It is not out of the question that artifacts or even some kind of base is maintained within the solar system because of the very and, and the possibility of detection. It might have been appeared preferable not to detect such a base or not. The moon seems one reasonable alternative site for a base. Humanity's got its first glimpse of the far side of the moon in the late 1959 when the Soviet spacecraft Luna 3 relayed some images back to the mission control. Subsequent missions improved upon the quality, but alas, revealed nothing but more moon. This idea of concealment lingers to this day. Many are still holding out hope that somewhere in the solar system the ruins or technology or some unknown intelligence lie waiting to be found. In 1988, the Soviet Union launched a probe known as Phobos 2. By the name implies that part of his mission was to investigate the Martian moon Phobos. The probe arrived at Phobos without any major complication, and in late March of 1989 began preparation to plant two instruments on its surface. But then contact with Phobos 2 was lost. In the weeks and months that followed, rumors began to circulate. Pu- pu- pul- Puzzling features and shadows were said to be visible on some of the final images transmitted by Phobos 2, the nature and the origin of which supposedly defied explanation throughout various articles, conference, and television programs. These images were casually unveiled to the public. They appear to depict an unidentified craft in orbit around Mars. It was said that an alien spaceship had attacked and disabled Phobos 2. Not only that, but it cast an enormous elliptical shadow upon the surface of Mars. But this shadow appeared quite suddenly that we didn't immediately understand what it was. And probably didn't pay attention to it because then it continues again as a stripe. So it is not an object hanging above the surface but a shadow on the surface of the planet. Probably. because, well, it doesn't completely cover, as to speak, the signal from the surface of the Mars. It looks like a rocket taking off from the surface of the Mars with concealed forget. How do you feel about this? Well, if you let your imagination run wild, then of course you can believe this kind of explanation, but we tend to believe completely real, although still unexplained circumstances that created such a trace. Most likely still a shadow from some object on the surface, because surface elements are visible through the shadow. The mystery persisted for about a decade or two until the raw data from the forward mission became readily acce- accessible. The, the unidentified craft looked an awful lot like an overexposed transmission aircraft artifact. In fact, all the infrared images appeared to have a white streak. Meanwhile, the elliptical shadow belonged to Phobos. Its elongated shape was due to the multiple scans of photographs being taken in sequence before assembling the final image. Stories like Phobos incident have become rather far from the coast. Some initial better discovery leaves an information vacuum which is immediately filled by fantastical speculation. A printing artifact becomes a tower on the moon. The absence of light and shadow becomes a human face on Mars. And this prominent boulders on both Mars and Phobos conjure images of certain Stanley Kubrick frame. More recently, a Chinese rover on the moon captured this image of some sort of Scapus hut. Upon closer inspection, everyone was absolutely gobsmacked, and the hut was exposed to be as a rock. Whether you are you are an amateur or professional, you have no experience or decades worth. You are never quite even to this kind of self-deception, and you want something to be true. It can be deceptively easy to convince yourself that it is. Remember that prize money, the 100,000 francs offered to anyone who discovered a means of communicating with another planet, excluding Mars. Well, in 1937, there was a claim on that prize. The claim was none other than world renowned inventor Nikola Tesla. In 1899, Tesla had been experimenting with wireless radio communication. During some of these experiments, he had picked up some rather odd transmission, although I could not disappear in their meaning. The feeling is constantly growing on me that I have been the first to hear the greetings of one planet to another. The purpose was behind this electrical signals. Tesla described the signals as repeating sequence of either three or four pulses. Decades later, Tesla was still convinced that he had received an interplanetary message that had been deduced its origin. The signals consisted in a regular repetition of number, and subsequent study convinced me that it had been emanated from Mars. I believe that Mars used number for communication because numbers are universal. Then in 1937, Tesla announced his plan to unveil a new technology capable of not just interplanetary but interstellar communication. With such impressive technology at hand, Tesla felt confident that he soon be awarded the 100,000 francs. I intend to claim the Perry Guzman Prize, but I'm not just as sure as the prize will be awarded to me as if I already had it in my pocket. They have got to do it. I didn't do it. The prize was instead awarded to the crew of Apollo 11 in 1969. As for the alleged message from Mars, well, we don't really know. Well, Earth was much quieter back in 1899. It was still far from radio silent. Who knows, perhaps it was nothing but the roaring noise of a distant thunderstorm upon sailing onto the shadow of Venus in 1975. Venera 9 detected faint flashes of light. The emissions were broadly consistent with lightning, but it is a matter of interpretation. Data added by subsequent missions are likewise consistent with Venus in thunderstorms. Yet for, yet for sort of any conclusive evidence, presuming that lightning does occur on Venus, so did it explain the Asian light? Well, it has been estimated that the night side of Venus would need to maintain a rate of some 1,000 lightning strikes per second to heat a glow that's visible from Earth. That's more than 20 times the mean rate on Earth that would likely have been observed a long time ago. In the blunt words of another paper, lightning is not acceptable as an explanation for the Asian light, but in certain parts of the world there is another striking phenomena illuminating the night sky. These vibrant curtains of light are the result of charged particles ejected by the sun, colliding with the Earth's magnetic field. Could something akin to the northern lights be responsible for the Asian lights? Aurora have indeed been observed on planets like Jupiter and Saturn, so it might seem like an obvious illusion. What makes it so not so obvious is that the magnetic field around Venus is virtually non-existent. It is extremely weak and transient and is generated by a completely different process than here on Earth. In spite of this, when caught in the path of a solar storm, Venus has in recent years had observed to glow. The underlying mechanism of this glow is still poorly understood, but there is an apparent link between solar activity and diffuse emission of light on the night side of Venus. Not only that, but there is a weak correlation between the solar activity and the acid light observation. According to author John Barentine, who's written the definitive book on the subject, the data are inclusive, but there are hints in this figure that something is indeed up. The apparent spike in the number of acid light sightings in the 1950s correlates with one of the strongest solar maxima of the past 250 years. While all of this sounds quite promising, it's a bit too early to celebrate. Nothing conclusive had been found, and despite many attempts to do so, the Hudson light has never recorded on camera. Until that happens, this nearly 400-year-old mystery remains in limbo. So, did we ascribe to the atmosphere of Venus or the mind of the observer? Perhaps we should have listened to Goveni Riccoli from the very beginning. Perhaps it is nothing more than a convincing illusion. The search for cosmic neighbors continues. Many scientists now believe that both Venus and Mars used to resemble Earth in the distant past. Perhaps a relic biosphere or the remnants of one teeming population can still be found in Venusian clouds or the Martian soil. There is nothing mounting evidence that the Jovian moons Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto, along with the Enceladus and the Titan of the Saturn, all host of vast subglacial ocean, could resilient microbes or even larger organisms have found a way to thrive beneath the frozen crust? Who knows? An apparent hut on the moon or moonlit on Mars night might one day match our most outlandish expectation. Even if Earth should prove to the sole harbor of life within the solar system, every dot in the night sky has the potential to host another. And with the launch of the James Webb Telescope, there is no telling what secrets are to be unveiled. Always remember that if at first if you don't understand, it's definitely aliens.